Okay, let's unpack this. We are taking a deep dive into some really personal and sometimes challenging transitions in life.
Yeah, we're talking about relationships, family dynamics, especially after a big loss.
Right, like divorce
Hmm.
or the death of a loved one. And we're going to pay particular attention to finding romance and connection later on in life.
That's right. And we've got a great mix of sources here, some practical advice, from places like Psych Central on dating post-divorce and Sitzium Grief Support on family stuff.
And also some more academic research too, right?
Yeah, studies on romance and dating and later life, and broader work on transitions and intimate relationships. So a good blend.
So our mission really is to dig into all this for you, pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights.
And just help you get a handle on what's going on under the surface in these complex situations.
Exactly. Whether you're, going through it yourself or maybe supporting a friend or family member, we want to give you a clearer picture.
Maybe some perspectives you haven't thought about. It's definitely heavy stuff, emotionally layered.
For sure.
But we'll explore it respectfully, aiming for insight and hopefully some real understanding of the patterns and possibilities.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Part one. Starting fresh after a marriage ends, we can start with dating after divorce, using that Psych Central source.
Okay.
It points out, and it's so true, divorce is just one of the hardest things people go through.
Oh, absolutely. A
Yeah.
major life stressor.
And then the idea of dating again, especially if you've been out of the scene for years,
Yeah,
it can feel, well, daunting isn't even the word sometimes.
it's a massive adjustment. And, one of the first things these sources stress, and it's critical, is
Yeah.
that there's no magic clock, no set time for when you're ready.
Right, it's not like 6 months and you're good to go.
Not at all. It's intensely personal. What feels right for one person could be totally wrong for another. Comparing your journey just adds noise you don't need.
That's such a good starting point, just giving yourself that permission, that grace. So, okay, say someone is starting to feel ready or maybe just curious. What are some tips the sources give?
Well, several good ones. The first one echoes that timing point.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rush it.
Take it slow.
Yeah, even if you feel this urge to, connect or distract yourself, the advice is really try to slow down. Be present in the dating process itself. It's not just about pacing the relationship. It's about allowing yourself to keep growing.
Taking it slow allows for growth. I like that connection. What else?
Trusting your instincts. That comes up a lot.
Your gut feeling.
Exactly. If you've done some work processing the divorce, you probably have a better sense of yourself now. So listen to that inner voice. It's totally okay to change your mind, say no if something feels off.
Especially in unfamiliar territory like dating again after a long time, trusting your gut seems essential.
It really is. And you mentioned personal growth earlier.
Yeah.
That's seen as foundational.
How so?
Prioritizing your own self-improvement before you start dating and while you're dating. Rediscovering who you are now outside that marriage. Figuring out your needs, your boundaries.
That internal work.
Right. It strengthens you emotionally, sets you up for healthier connections down the road. It's not about being perfectly fixed or anything, but just being on that path of well-being.
So it's ongoing, not like a checkbox you tick off.
Definitely ongoing.
And how about being open with potential partners?
Honesty is generally recommended. You don't have to, dump your entire history on date one.
Probably not advisable.
Right. But being upfront that you're divorced, and maybe generally what you're looking for now, that can be a good filter. And importantly, if you feel safe, allowing some vulnerability, that builds real connection.
Vulnerability when it feels safe.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the actual, mechanics of dating today? It's different.
Totally different.
What?
The whole online thing, the apps, the swiping, it can feel like another planet if you've been out of it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So the advice here is crucial. Give yourself grace. Be patient with yourself as you learn this new landscape. It's okay to feel confused or awkward.
Permission to mess up a little. I like that. Now, even before downloading an app, what are the big questions, the sort of self-check questions the sources say you should ask?
The biggest one really ties back to the start. Have you actually processed the split? Have you grieved?
Grieving the end of the marriage itself.
Yes, even if it was a bad marriage. The sources are really clear. Grieving is essential. It takes time, maybe means therapy, maybe a support group. You got to let those emotions run their course.
It's a real loss even if the person is still around.
Absolutely. Another key question, do you know what you're looking for now?
Because your preferences might have changed.
Exactly. What you valued then might be different from what you need or want in this phase of life. Take time to think about that.
Good point.
And finally, maybe the most practical check-in. Are you feeling emotionally stable? Life's always got ups and downs, but are you feeling reasonably grounded? Focusing on your own mental health first is key before you commit energy to someone else.
That feels like a really solid framework. Okay, let's broaden it a bit from divorce specifically. Let's look at being single later in life more generally, maybe through divorce, maybe widowhood. The romance and transition sources talk about this, right?
They do. And the experience seems really diverse, depending on how someone became single.
Makes sense.
That romance study, they talked to 68 people, aged 55 up to 92. It showed this interesting split. A lot of people, men and women, talked about finding this real sense of freedom, liberation almost.
Freedom. That might surprise some people. We often associate being single later in life with, loneliness.
It's a bit counterintuitive, yeah, but it came up again and again. Like Carol, 76, she said, and this is a quote, "Until I got divorced, I had never in my whole life lived alone." And I love that. I like being able to sleep when I want and eat when I want. Nice not to have to answer to anybody.
Wow. That really captures it, that sense of autonomy, especially if you've always lived with someone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the split, the duality. There's another side.
Okay.
Alongside that freedom, others talked about lonesomeness.
Lonesomeness, not loneliness.
Right. The sources make that distinction. It's not necessarily clinical isolation, but more that ache of missing someone specific to share things with. The day-to-day joys, the little worries, missing that go-to person.
Ah, that's a subtle but really important difference, that specific companionship gap.
Yeah. And thinking about divorce again, that transition source points out that older divorced folks are a really diverse group. Depends a lot on when they divorced.
Right, because divorce often happens younger.
Yeah. So someone older might have been divorced for decades or just a few years, and the impact of that divorce on their well-being later seems linked to how the marriage was before it ended.
How so?
If it was a really difficult, unhappy marriage, divorce might actually lead to relief, better well-being later on. But if the marriage was just kind of, okay, moderately content, the divorce might lead to more disappointment or a dip in well-being.
So the quality of the past relationship really matters long term. And there's that line in the transition source. It really stuck with me. Divorce ends a marriage, not a relationship.
That's such a powerful line, isn't it? It just nails that enduring impact. The history, the shared life, the emotions, they don't just switch off.
Right.
The source even mentions some people grieving the death of an ex-spouse years later.
Yeah.
Maybe the loss from the divorce itself wasn't fully processed back then.
That adds such a layer of complexity.
Wow.
The transitions source also touched on same-sex relationships ending. Any unique points there?
Yeah, historically there were differences. Often fewer legal or religious hoops to jump through to break up, which could make it simpler in one way.
But maybe less protection, too.
Exactly. Less legal protection around assets or support. Interestingly, though, some findings suggested they might be more likely to stay friends with exes. Maybe navigating shared LGBTQ plus community ties played a role there.
Fascinating how social and legal contexts shape these things. Okay, so we've looked at starting over the single life landscape. Let's shift gears to part 2. Family ties, navigating grief together.
Okay.
This is about how death impacts family dynamics, drawing from Satsima and transitions. Losing someone, it just throws the whole family system off balance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a massive disruption. And disagreements.
Yeah.
Super common.
Okay.
Which often surprises people, I think.
Yeah, you'd think everyone would just pull together.
You'd hope. But emotions are sky high, people are exhausted, and suddenly you're making really tough decisions. Funerals, money, belongings. Satsima highlights how death changes how a family functions. Roles shift, people might act totally out of character because they're just drowning in grief and stress.
So what are the main reasons the sources give for why families run into conflict after a death?
Well, one big one is unresolved stuff bubbling up.
Old baggage.
Totally. Old arguments, resentment about who did the caregiving, sibling rivalries you thought were long buried. It can all resurface when everyone's raw and together.
Like grief shines a light on the cracks that were already there.
You really can. Another huge factor. Just different ways of coping.
How people grieve differently.
Exactly. Some need to talk about the person constantly, look at photos. Others need to avoid it to get through the day. Some want to sort belongings right away. It feels productive. Others can't bear the thought for months, years even.
And those styles can clash badly when decisions have to be made.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially about shared things or responsibilities, your age, your relationship to the person who died, your usual family role that all plays into a spouse grieves differently than a child or a cousin. The oldest sibling might feel They have to take charge.
Which might help some, but annoy others.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Existing dynamics, who's the responsible one, the sensitive one, often get amplified.
And then just the sheer stress of it all.
Oh yeah, the heightened stress and emotion are central. Sadness, anger, guilt, maybe survivor's guilt, even relief sometimes. People aren't thinking straight, they're tired, their filters are down. It's fertile ground for arguments.
And what about the too close for comfort idea?
That comes up too. Families often gather intensely right after a death, stay together, which can be great support.
Right.
But if you're a family that doesn't usually spend tons of close time together, that sudden forced proximity under immense stress, it can make things worse. Little irritations become huge deals.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the pressures. It sounds incredibly tough. But Satsima also gives some tips, right? Strategies to help families get through it together.
Yes, thankfully. A big one is consciously respecting each other's differences.
Acknowledging everyone grieves differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on their own timeline. It means maybe compromising sometimes or just agreeing to disagree respectfully. Really trying to see where the other person is coming from, even if you don't agree, can diffuse so much tension.
Respecting differences. Crucial. What else?
Focus on what's important.
Mm.
Try to step back from the small arguments and remember the big picture. What would the person you lost have wanted? What really matters right now? Keeping that shared love and memory central can help.
Remembering the shared purpose. That makes sense.
Yeah. And for those family members who cope by taking control, maybe micromanaging the funeral plans.
Yeah.
Find ways to channel that constructively. Give them specific tasks they can own where that need for control is actually helpful, not disruptive.
Channel the energy. Got it.
Communicate kindly. This sounds basic, but it's vital. Avoid you statements. You always do this. You never help. They just make people defensive.
Use I statements instead.
Right. I feel overwhelmed right now. I felt left out when that decision was made. It's less attacking, opens things up more.
Simple but hard under stress.
So hard.
Yeah.
And related to that, find it in your heart to forgive.
Forgive the out-of-character stuff.
Yeah. Grief makes people act weird sometimes, say things they regret. Try to give grace. Understand it might be their pain talking, not a personal attack. Don't let temporary blow-ups wreck long-term bonds.
Forgiveness as a way to preserve the family.
Definitely. And finally, plan. If possible, pre-planning helps immensely because decisions are already made. But even if not, making a plan together afterwards, talking through decisions, roles, timelines, make sure everyone feels heard and helps prevent future fights.
And don't be afraid to get outside help if needed.
Absolutely. A grief counselor, a mediator. Sometimes an outside perspective is what's needed if the family's really stuck.
Those are really practical, empathetic strategies. It's clear that grieving is personal, but getting through it as a family takes real collective effort.
Yeah, these are tools to help families weather the storm together instead of letting it pull them apart.
Okay. So we've talked dating after divorce, family grief. Let's move to our third part, focusing specifically on romance and relationships for adults aged 55 plus, the evolving landscape.
Right, drawing a lot from that romance and dating in later life study and the transition source.
That romance study sounds fascinating. 68 people, 55 up to 92. That's a wide age range.
It really is, and it gives us this great snapshot of just how diverse the experiences and goals are around relationships at this stage.
So what are the different goals people have? What are they looking for?
It's a whole spectrum. Some definitely still want traditional commitment, even remarriage.
Really? Marriage is still on the table for some.
Yeah, the sources quote people like Gloria, 75, saying she'd consider it if all the things were there. Bev, 60, called it the ultimate commitment. Penny, 78, had a more traditional view, like, God says we need to be married.
So that desire for marriage persists for some.
For some, yes. But, and this is a really key point from transitions, while remarriage happens, especially after widowhood, the majority of older people actually don't remarry. And often, they prefer not to.
That's surprising. Why not?
Lots of reasons, according to the sources. Practical things, like fewer available partners, especially for women. Fewer of the younger age incentives, like starting a family.
Financial reasons, too.
Big time. Protecting estates, making sure inheritances go to their kids, that's a major factor in not remarrying. And maybe the most powerful reason, especially for women who've maybe been caregivers before or were in traditional marriages.
They don't want to give up their independence.
Exactly. A strong reluctance to lose that hard-won autonomy or become a caregiver again. There's a great quote from an 81-year-old widow. I wouldn't get married again for all the tea in China. I am set in my ways. I love being alone.
Wow, that says it all. The value of that independence. So, if not remarriage for many, what else are they looking for?
A lot of people want something less serious, more flexible, focused on companionship, having fun, shared activities, but keeping their independence.
Like dating, but not necessarily moving towards living together.
Precisely. Choice, 76,
Yeah.
wanted someone to take me out every now and then you go on your merry way. And 71 was clear. I would not be interested in the together 247 things. Yvetta, 59, was open to dating, but said it would take a really, really special person for me to commit seriously.
Connection and fun, but keeping separate lives.
Yeah. And critically, sexual intimacy is still very much desired by many, whether it's within a committed thing or something more casual. Willa, 73, wanted a sexual relationship and someone to do things with, but not necessarily live with. Cheryl, 60, even talked about dating multiple people, having sexual relationships whenever they happen to spend the night. But you're not moving in.
That really pushes back against the stereotype that older people aren't interested in sex.
Not at all. Despite worries about physical changes, that romance study had quotes about great sex lives. James, 82, called it the best sex I've ever had. Glenn, 83, said it was far, far better than I ever dreamed.
That's fantastic to hear.
And Transitions adds that sex can involve more focus on cuddling, kissing, using aids, a broader definition of intimacy.
That's important context. Now, beyond dating, the sources also mention alternative relationship structures gaining popularity.
Yes, two main ones from Transitions. Cohabitation is more common, but it often functions as an alternative to marriage now, not just a step towards it.
Especially for those who've been married before.
All right, and have kids. Practical reasons again. Protects inheritances, gives a financial cushion, especially for women, and these relationships are often reported as more equal, more egalitarian.
So, cohabitation is a deliberate choice for practicality and structure. Interesting. What was the other one?
Living apart together.
LAT.
LAT. Yeah, it's big in Europe, gaining ground elsewhere. It's a committed, intimate relationship, but the partners keep separate homes.
Best of both worlds, maybe.
That's the idea. Balances intimacy and autonomy. Sources say it's popular, again, especially with older women wanting independence. It protects assets, navigates potential caregiving issues without making it automatic. One woman said, I'm very happy with him, but I don't want him here all the time. Then I'd lose the freedom I have now.
LAT sounds like a really appealing model for some. Okay, so with all these different goals and structures, what are the main worries or concerns older adults have about dating and new relationships?
Financial fears came up a lot, big time.
Fear of being taken advantage of.
Yeah. Or just worries about a potential partner's money situation. There's that awful nurse with a purse stereotype.
Yeah.
The idea that some older men might be looking for a caregiver who also has money. And 71 said she was afraid of being taken advantage of. Judy, 63, echoed it. I don't want to take care of someone. It's a real fear.
That sounds incredibly frustrating and prevalent.
It really ties into the next big worry. Caretaking.
Not wanting to become a caregiver again.
Especially for those who've already done it.
Yeah.
Sylvia, 74, was quoted saying, if I wanted to be a nurse, then I would be working as a nurse. That past experience makes people very cautious.
Totally understandable. What else?
Family concerns can play a role what the adult kids think. Their opinions can sometimes impact dating choices.
Ah, the family weighing in.
And then even with the desire for intimacy, there are real concerns about sex itself.
Beyond just physical changes.
Yeah. Worries about performance? Sure, but also STIs, sexually transmitted infections. Rates are rising in older groups. And there's discomfort about how to bring up safe sex with a new partner. Margot, 62, wondered, can you ask a guy that, do you have a clean bill of health?
Those are serious, practical conversations that need to happen. How about actually meeting people? How has that changed?
Well, the traditional ways, like meeting through friends, can get harder. The pool shifts.
So what works now?
Online dating is huge. Apps and sites like Hinge, Match, Bumble came up. Dennis, 64, met his husband online, said it led to everything that I really want.
So technology is definitely helping.
Yeah. And another thing mentioned, rekindling old flames.
Like looking up high school sweetheart.
Exactly. Using Facebook, finding people from the past. Carol, 76, liked dating someone from high school because you're comfortable, you have a history.
Combining the new tech with old history, it makes sense. Interestingly, though, didn't the romance study find that for some, dating later actually felt easier?
Easier. Wow. After all the challenges, that sounds surprising.
I thought so, too. But the reason was feeling more self-aware, more certain about who they are and what they want.
Ah, that confidence from life experience.
Right.
Having lived, gone through things, they feel more comfortable being direct. Keith, 76, said, "It's easy to be very direct and open and honest at this age. I know what I'm looking for, and I know who I am."
That makes a lot of sense. That self-knowledge is powerful. And one last point from transitions, connection doesn't have to be romantic, right?
Exactly. Non-sexual companionship is presented as a really valid, important alternative.
The steady companions idea.
Yeah. Platonic relationships, often opposite sex, with affection and support, but not defined as a couple. It can be just as good at combating that lonesomeness and providing companionship, often favored by women, though sometimes the men might want more.
That really broadens the picture of what fulfilling connection can look like later in life.
It absolutely does. It expands our understanding.
Okay, wow. We have covered so much today. From the personal journey of dating after divorce,
To navigating those really complex family dynamics during grief.
and then exploring this incredibly diverse, evolving landscape of romance, relationships, intimacy for older adults.
Yeah, the key things that really stand out from the sources are, well, first, these big life transitions, divorce, death, they're profound. They bring huge challenges, no doubt.
But also possibilities.
Yes, possibilities for finding a new sense of self, independence, new kinds of connection, and romance and intimacy later in life. It's definitely not one size fits all.
So many different goals and structures.
Right. And unique challenges, those financial fears, caregiving worries, but also it's deeply desired and can be incredibly fulfilling. It just requires adapting, communicating openly about everything from what you want to, sexual
And
health,
for families grieving?
understanding, forgiveness, and really conscious communication seem key to holding on to those important long-term relationships.
And kind of underpinning all of it is this idea that there's no single right way through any of this.
Exactly. It's about understanding the dynamics, figuring out your own needs in this phase of life, and finding the connections that work for you.
It's a process of adaptation, self-discovery.
Precise.
So, reflecting on everything we've talked about, the difficulties of dating again, the minefield of family grief, the sheer variety of later life relationships from marriage and cohabitation to LAT and steady companions, here's something to leave you with, something to think about. Given all this diversity, how do our standard ideas, our societal expectations about what a successful relationship or a coupled life should look like, how do those expectations need to stretch or evolve as we age, as our lives change, and as the ways we connect become maybe more complex, but also potentially more liberating?